We come together today, here in the heart of the Amazon, at a pivotal moment in human history. A moment that demands courage.
The morning felt suspended in time, the winter air around Windsor still and cold as pale sunlight reflected faintly off the ancient stone walls. Inside Clarence's house, Prince William arrived earlier than usual, hoping for a rare moment of quiet before the day's duties. These early hours were normally reserved for private briefings, handwritten notes, and a few precious minutes of solitude, small pockets of calm that offered structure in a life with little room for stillness. But that serenity was short-lived. Before he could take a sip of the tea waiting on his desk, an aide entered with the unmistakably tense expression of someone carrying news the palace never wished to confront. Requesting a confidential moment, the aide waited as William closed the folder before him and stood. A routine inspection at Royal Lodge the previous day had revealed something entirely unexpected. Royal Lodge, long the ivy-wrapped, tree-lined residence of Sarah Ferguson, had undergone a standard check meant only to confirm structural safety and updated security requirements. Yet as maintenance staff cleared an older wing, they opened a sealed room untouched for years. Inside, they discovered boxes filled with documents, recorded tapes, and personal writings that raised immediate alarm. The handwriting varied, the dates spanned decades, and nothing matched the Duchess's belongings or any officially catalogued palace archives. As the aide relayed this, the room seemed to grow quieter, as though the walls were listening. William asked the essential questions: what was found, why it was concerning, whether the Duchess had any knowledge, but answers were few, and the details emerging were troubling. Some documents reference private meetings during the turbulent years between Princess Diana and senior royal advisors, others contain personal reflections from individuals who should never have possessed such intimate insight. Most unsettling were transcripts of conversations involving the young princes, moments from their childhood that had no business being documented by outsiders. These were not forgotten papers, they were fragments of the most painful, politically volatile era in modern royal history. Though William maintained a calm exterior, those present noticed the subtle shift, a tightening of the jaw, a stillness behind the eyes, as memories he had long compartmentalized resurfaced. Investigators explained that the boxes had been discovered in a corner room and used for nearly 2 decades, likely placed there without the Duchess's involvement or knowledge. Quiet whispers began to spread through the estate as the implications sank in. The Duchess, long a figure of contradiction, warm, affable, Sarah Ferguson had always been a paradox within the royal orbit, endlessly generous, warm, and affable, yet often drawn into controversy through misfortune, misplaced trust, or personal hardship. She had made mistakes, certainly, but never anything resembling betrayal of the crown, which made the possibility that her home now housed documents capable of igniting an international scandal feel both implausible and deeply unsettling. By midday, William had cleared his schedule and secluded himself with senior advisors and security officials in a private briefing room where the air was thick with tension. The monarchy had weathered storms before, but this was different, not an attack from the press or a public misstep, but a ghost from the past resurfacing without warning. William understood better than anyone the fragility of the monarchy's narrative, especially in the years following the late Queen's passing, a turning point that ended an era defined by restraint, duty, and quiet endurance. King Charles now navigated a new age of scrutiny and shifting public expectations, where secrecy was increasingly met with criticism. And now, a discovery capable of reopening old wounds threatened the delicate balance they struggled to maintain. As dusk settled, William met with the palace's legal advisors to address the documents' authenticity, origins, and the motives behind their hidden storage. Why Royal Lodge? Why the home of a woman who had already endured decades of public scrutiny? After the advisors departed, William stood alone at the tall window, watching the winter light fade behind the towers of Windsor, his responsibilities pressing heavier than ever. He was not only a son protecting his mother's memory but a future king safeguarding the integrity of an institution older than the nation itself. Meanwhile, Sarah Ferguson received a discreet message requesting an urgent discussion about an unexpected matter involving her estate. Recovering from recent health challenges, she had hoped for peace, but something in the tone told her that peace was slipping away. The situation was evolving faster than anyone anticipated, and although the full scope of the discovery remained unclear, one truth had already crystallized: whatever had surfaced inside Sarah Ferguson's home held the power to shake the monarchy to its core, and this was only the beginning. When palace archivists later entered the briefing room carrying the most troubling documents, William, known for his measured composure, shifted almost imperceptibly, his posture tightening. The first document, a handwritten memo about Princess Diana penned by someone with no formal authority, blurred the line between observation and invasive analysis, dredging up painful memories from the 1990s. His breathing slowed as he turned the pages with deliberate care, absorbing every word. He refused an advisor's offer to pause, he needed to know everything. Second document was worse, unofficial summaries of conversations between Princess Diana and senior advisors during periods of intense public strain, suggesting someone had listened in, watched, or observed in secret. William read only a few lines before closing the folder with a quiet but unmistakable force. Among the materials were notes about the young princes, their schooling, private moments, and emotional struggles following their parents' separation, details that had no place being recorded, let alone hidden in a private residence. Leaning forward, fingers interlocked, William processed the implications. This was no archival accident. Someone had deliberately documented his family's vulnerabilities, perhaps for leverage, influence, or reasons still unknown. Archivists explained the room had been sealed behind a swollen door, the boxes stacked chaotically, some wrapped in materials that suggested hurried concealment rather than careful preservation, a detail that deepened the mystery. Finally, an advisor voiced the question hanging over the room: could Sarah Ferguson have known about the contents? William answered with deliberate restraint, reminding them that assumptions would cloud their judgment. Whatever the truth, the Duchess of York deserved the chance to speak for herself before any conclusions were drawn, yet even as Prince William reassured the room with steady words, a quiet unease crept into his thoughts. The Duchess of York had endured financial troubles, questionable advisors, and individuals who had exploited her trusting nature. Any one of them could have placed the items in her home. Had someone used her vulnerability as a shield? William moved toward the window, a familiar gesture signaling the need for space, and the cold winter light revealed a flicker of emotion rarely seen in him. Anger, controlled, silent, but unmistakable. Not aimed at the Duchess or the staff, but at the notion that someone had weaponized the most painful chapters of his life. When he turned back, his voice carried a calm authority as he ordered that the documents be secured immediately, the review conducted under absolute confidentiality, no leaks, no speculation, no missteps. A security official then revealed another chilling detail. Some items were dated during moments of heightened tension between the palace and the press, suggesting that outsiders may have attempted to observe or influence internal discussions. Though no direct threat was apparent, the implication alone tightened the air in the room. William requested a comprehensive list of every person who had visited Royal Lodge over 2 decades. It would be lengthy, but he insisted the investigation begin at once. Meanwhile, word spread discreetly among senior staff that something significant had occurred, prompting departments to act with heightened caution and prompting temporary restrictions on certain archives. Late in the afternoon, Sarah Ferguson received her first formal communication. Her response was immediate. She wanted transparency, cooperation, and to speak to Prince William directly. That sincerity, edged with fear, echoed through the message. William agreed to meet her, but only after reviewing every remaining document. He owed her respect, but he owed the crown clarity. As evening settled over Windsor, he read page after page of memories he had spent years trying to protect, passages that stung, shocked, and tightened the knot in his stomach. This was no misunderstanding. Something deliberate had occurred inside Royal Lodge long ago, and now it demanded confrontation. By nightfall, William understood one thing with absolute certainty: the investigation would not stop with the documents. The past had resurfaced, and he would not allow it to unravel the present. Across the estate, Sarah Ferguson prepared herself for the meeting. She had weathered many storms, but the summons she received carried a weight she hadn't felt in years. Sitting alone in Royal Lodge, her sanctuary during recent months of medical recovery, she felt peace slip away as an urgent message requested her immediate presence at the palace. She dressed carefully, dark coat, simple scarf, no bold colors, and stepped into the cold air, her breath catching slightly as she entered the waiting car. As the vehicle pulled away, winter branches blurred past the window, and a familiar dread settled in her chest. Upon arriving, she was guided through private corridors she had walked many times, though never under circumstances so fraught. Staff greeted her politely but with guarded eyes. The air was heavy with tension, reminiscent of the days when the palace had buzzed with whispers about her marriage or finances. In a warm drawing room lined with portraits of kings and queens, she waited, hands folded, pulse quickening, until Prince William stepped inside. His greeting was polite, neutral, and that neutrality unnerved her more than anger would have. She saw in him both the boy she had known and the future king burdened with protecting his mother's memory and the integrity of the crown. When she asked him to tell her what was wrong, he explained calmly that a sealed room on her property had been opened and that its contents, documents and recordings from some of the most sensitive eras of modern royal history, had raised serious concern. Her hand flew to her mouth as the truth struck her. Something hidden, something unknown, had been sitting within her own home. With wide, earnest eyes, she insisted she had no knowledge of the items. William listened carefully, balancing caution with fairness. The Duchess explained that the room hadn't been opened in years, that countless helpers, movers, advisors, and sometimes opportunists had passed through her life, some during periods of desperate financial strain. She vaguely recalled an associate bringing boxes nearly 20 years earlier. She assumed they held family items or charity materials and never inspected them, simply having them stored away. William knew she had encountered turbulent years and questionable acquaintances, and he understood she rarely acted with malice. But intent was only half the equation, consequence mattered equally. Growing emotional, the Duchess confessed that the idea her home had been used improperly horrified her, insisting she would never conceal anything of such magnitude, never. The sincerity in Sarah Ferguson's voice was unmistakable, but sincerity alone could not solve the crisis unfolding around them. William asked her gently if she could recall any visitors, deliveries, or unusual movements during the years when the sealed room might have been accessed. The Duchess searched her memory, grasping at fragments blurred by time, names, vague faces, fleeting interactions that now carried an ominous weight. "I was careless with trust," she whispered, her voice thin. "I always have been." It was the closest she could come to explaining the inexplicable. Then came the fear that pierced deeper than anything else, her daughters. She worried they would be judged by association, swept into speculation, or overshadowed by yet another scandal tied to her past. William's expression softened for a brief moment as he reassured her that her daughters would be protected and that no conclusions would be drawn until the full review was complete. When their meeting ended, she rose quietly, offering a subdued thank you, feeling the portraits along the corridor watching her as though aware she had unknowingly stepped into one of the darkest secrets in royal memory. Outside, the cold winter air struck her cheeks, and she fought back tears. Whatever had been found in Royal Lodge was not her doing, but it was now undeniably part of her burden. Inside the palace, William returned to the investigation room where more boxes waited, along with the sinking certainty that this was no forgotten archive but a buried scheme. That truth became undeniable when the final box arrived. The palace had gone quiet, most staff gone, as the archivists, gloved and solemn, opened a box older and more fragile than the rest. Beneath stacks of disordered papers lay a smaller sealed container marked only with faded initials. Inside were photographs, grainy, covert, forbidden. Private corridors. Restricted rooms. Kensington Palace spaces where photography was never allowed. The first image showed a young William being watched without his knowledge. The next captured a private family moment from the aftermath of Diana's death, a time when he and Harry believed themselves shielded from intrusion. Then came the photograph that shifted the entire atmosphere, Princess Diana herself, alone, exhausted, unaware she was being observed inside her own home. William's breath caught. Another image showed a senior advisor entering a confidential meeting, the angle suggesting the shot had been taken through a crack in a door. It was systematic. Targeted. Someone had surveilled the royal family. Someone with access. Someone who knew the palace's blind spots. Someone who had chosen the Duchess of York's home as the perfect hiding place. William leaned over the photographs, jaw tight, silent fury simmering beneath his composure. The camera used was discreet, neither cheap nor professional. The handwritten dates ranged from the late 1990s to the early 2000s. This was no momentary intrusion, it was a pattern. "Who else has seen these?" he asked, voice cold with resolve. "Only 2 archivists. No one else." The images were secured instantly. Then came the final envelope, handwritten notes detailing palace layouts, security camera positions, and the blind spots where surveillance could occur unseen. William froze. This was infiltration, not curiosity. Knowledge accessible only to someone with proximity, perhaps even trust. And the container holding the photographs had been sealed far more carefully than the rest, deliberate concealment, not accidental storage. William's expression hardened into chilling clarity. Someone had used Sarah Ferguson's residence as a covert hiding place precisely because it lacked the intense scrutiny of royal buildings and because her complicated history made her an ideal, unintentional shield. As the meeting ended, William issued quiet but uncompromising orders. The photographs would be placed in the highest security archive, and the investigation would escalate beyond documents. It would seek the person who had dared to spy on his mother, his family, and the monarchy itself. The discovery inside Royal Lodge had already shaken the palace. But the real crisis began when the final box revealed covert photographs taken in forbidden palace corridors, private rooms, and even candid moments. Of Princess Diana, images captured by someone with insider access and hidden for decades in Sarah Ferguson's home. William's shock hardened into resolve as he ordered a discreet investigation into every visitor, staff member, and associate linked to the lodge. But before the team could even begin, another storm erupted. The following morning, the palace moved with unusual tension, footsteps echoing sharply and doors closing like whispers of an internal emergency. William, exhausted from a sleepless night thinking about the intrusion, headed into a private strategy meeting meant to contain the fallout, only for an even more devastating revelation to arrive at his desk. A routine DNA report, expected to be a brief medical formality, instead arrived as a thick envelope filled with detailed genetic comparisons, paternal lineage analysis, and multiple cross-check tests he had never authorized. Halfway through the stack, a single line changed everything. His breath stalled, the room tightened, and the certainty of his entire identity cracked open. The photographs had been a warning, but the DNA results were a shockwave. And as William stood at the window of Kensington Palace, the gardens calm and unchanged outside, he understood the truth. The real storm had only begun, and nothing in his life, or in the monarchy, would ever be the same again. William's mind spun with questions no son should ever have to ask. Had his father known? Had the whispers and strange tensions in old photographs always meant something more? His mother's protective glances, the unexplained silences, the strained moments, were they clues he had never understood until now? With the DNA report shaking in his hand, he strode through the palace corridors, each step fueled by hurt, disbelief, and a rising sense of betrayal. He didn't knock when he reached King Charles's office. This was beyond protocol. Charles looked up from his papers, the ordinary calm of his morning shattered the instant he saw William's expression. When the report hit the desk, the king's face shifted from confusion to horror to fear. His trembling hands, the faltering breath, the dawning recognition, William saw it all. Rumors, Charles whispered, they had always been there, but only as noise, never truth. But this wasn't rumor. This was science. Evidence. And someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to put it in William's hands. The king insisted he never doubted his son, yet his words felt like a shield rather than an answer. He admitted the marriage had once been fraught, that cruel whispers had circulated during darker years, but nothing had ever been proven. Still, William demanded to know who authorized such extensive testing, who accessed royal genetic records, and why a document this detailed had landed on his desk now. Charles urged caution, insisting they needed an independent genetic advisor they could trust before making any decisions. But the damage was already spreading. Neither man noticed the young assistant lingering outside the door, frozen by the shock of what she'd overheard, DNA results, paternity doubts, hidden rumors coming to life. Fear and curiosity battled inside her until she fled down the corridor, heart racing, carrying a secret far too dangerous for her to hold. By midday, the weight of it had grown unbearable. By afternoon, she had searched online for a journalist known for exposing royal scandals. And with one impulsive decision, the private storm inside the palace had begun its descent toward the headlines. Sitting in a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the palace, the young assistant's hands trembled as she typed her message to a journalist known for breaking royal scandals. I have information about a bloodline crisis in the royal family, something they're trying to hide. The reply came within minutes. He wanted to meet, wanted details, wanted proof. She had none, only the terrifying words she'd overheard, but it was enough to spark a wildfire. Within hours, cryptic posts began appearing across social media, anonymous whispers hinting at a royal scandal. Discussion forums ignited, conspiracy theorists circled like vultures, and the palace, blindsided, never saw it coming. In his private quarters, William sat with Catherine, the DNA report spread between them as he revealed everything, his voice shaking with the weight of it. Catherine held his hand, telling him they would face whatever truth emerged together, even as her phone buzzed, then both, warnings from advisors, alerts from security. Online chatter was escalating. Meanwhile, Charles was midway through policy review when his private secretary burst in with a tablet showing trending topics that made the king's stomach drop. He called an emergency meeting within minutes, and senior advisors, legal counsel, security specialists, and communications directors gathered in a tense, windowless conference room. Rumors were spreading faster than facts. Every strategy, deny, ignore, investigate the leak, carried deadly risks. News outlets were circling, careful in their wording but hungry for confirmation. Back in his study, William opened an email from James Mitchell, one of Britain's most respected journalists. The message was cold, professional, devastating. He had the documents. Not rumors. Not screenshots. The actual DNA report. That night, unable to sleep, William realized the truth could not be outrun or buried behind palace gates. If his medical information was in someone else's hands, he needed to confront it head-on. Before dawn broke, he sent his decision: he would meet Mitchell privately. His security team protested, advisors warned him, even Catherine questioned the risk, but William's resolve was unshakable. On a quiet bench beside the Thames, far from cameras and crowds, the two men finally met. Mitchell, older than expected, arrived with a leather bag and a cautious expression. Without a word, he handed William photocopies of the report, the same report that had upended his life, page by page, chart by chart. Someone inside the palace had provided the journalist with everything. When William asked where he got it, Mitchell answered simply, "A source who believes the public has a right to know." The phrase made William's jaw clench. He asked whether Mitchell had children. The journalist nodded, 2 daughters. And in that moment, William forced him to imagine his own family waking up to headlines questioning their father's identity, their entire world collapsing under a truth they never asked for. The river flowed steadily beside them, indifferent to the stakes, as William realized the monarchy, the media, and his own identity were now caught in the same unstoppable current. Schools would fill with children asking cruel questions. Families would fracture not from truth but from the violent force of rumor, speculation, and scandal. A nation could be shaken, its institutions questioned, its stability fractured, all because of a story that might not even be real. That was the picture William painted for Mitchell as they sat on the cold riverside bench. These photocopies weren't verified, the testing methods weren't confirmed, and no one knew who wanted this information public, or why. Mitchell listened, the hard edges of the seasoned journalist softening as the humanity of the situation took hold. These were allegations that could alter the line of succession, he argued, matters that weren't merely private. And if it's false? William pushed back. Can you unring that bell? The journalist had no answer. William's request was simple, 24 hours. One day to verify the truth before the world saw unconfirmed claims as fact. Mitchell hesitated, weighing the cost of delaying the biggest story of his career, then finally agreed, 24 hours and no more. If he didn't publish, someone else would. It was the only mercy they had. Back at the palace, London waking around him, William struggled to breathe under the weight of what tomorrow might bring. Catherine was already moving, already making the calls he knew she would make. They needed independent testing, outside the palace's reach, airtight and indisputable. By afternoon, they were in a private medical suite, a genetics specialist quietly explaining the process. The cheek swab took seconds, a tiny gesture with the power to rewrite centuries. The doctor promised complete confidentiality, results by morning. Returning to the palace felt like stepping into controlled chaos. Advisors whispering, communications teams drafting statements for 2 possible futures, staff rushing through corridors thick with anxiety. Charles looked older than William had ever seen him, standing beneath portraits of ancestors who once embodied certainty. He apologized, not just for the crisis, but for every buried doubt and silence that had allowed this moment to exist. William didn't know if he could forgive, but he understood the pain behind the words. The world outside buzzed with theories and breaking news alerts, while inside the palace, father and son waited for science to decide the truth of their lives. Catherine held William through the sleepless night as his mind drifted to his mother and the answers she might have offered. Dawn crept in slowly. Somewhere across London, technicians analyzed his DNA, inching toward a verdict that would define everything. Then his phone lit up, the doctor's private number. Catherine sat up, breath held. The results were ready, the doctor said. He needed to come in person. The moment of truth had finally arrived. He said yes. He would be there within the hour. Whatever truth waited inside that envelope, whatever future it pointed toward, he and Catherine would face it together. The world was on the edge of learning something that would change everything. The doctor's office was painfully still when he arrived. Catherine had offered to come, but some revelations, no matter how devastating, had to be met alone. Across the desk, the doctor rested a plain manila envelope between them, so ordinary it almost mocked its own significance. Inside that envelope lay answers powerful enough to rewrite an entire life. The doctor reviewed the process once more, independent lab, cross-verification, strict protocols, definitive results. William listened in silence, the weight of inevitability settling over him. His fingers slid beneath the seal, steady in a way that surprised him. Maybe a part of him had already known. Maybe certainty, even painful certainty, was a relief after days of spiraling dread. He read the report. The technical terms blurred together, markers, alleles, percentages, but the conclusion was unmistakable. The second test confirmed what the first had whispered, the paternal markers didn't align. This wasn't a clerical error or a laboratory mishap. It was the truth coded into his DNA. He was not the man the world believed him to be. He sat motionless, numb and burning at the same time. Heartbreak for the man who raised him. Anger for a secret buried for decades. And beneath it all, an unexpected clarity, at least he finally knew. The doctor asked if he was all right. William couldn't speak. He simply nodded, placed the report back inside the envelope, and stepped out into a morning that felt impossibly ordinary for a day that had shattered his world. Catherine met him in the car. She didn't need to ask, one look at his face told her everything. She took his hand and held it all the way back to the palace, back to a life that suddenly no longer belonged to the person he thought he was. Only in the privacy of his quarters did he finally break. Catherine held him as the weight crashed over him, years of duty, heritage, legacy, all suddenly paper-thin. She reminded him gently that DNA did not determine who he was. His integrity, his service, his character, those were the things that shaped him. But her comfort couldn't change the reality. The world would not see it that way. When Charles arrived, dread carved into his features, the truth between them hung like a shadow. The king tried to speak, to apologize for decades of silence and shame. But there were no words large enough to cover a lifetime of unasked questions. William stepped back when Charles reached for him. The wound was too raw. As the hours passed, shock hardened into resolve. He could let this revelation destroy him, or he could face it with the same courage he applied to every other duty he carried. The palace prepared cautious, polished statements, but William knew they weren't enough. The world didn't need spin. It needed honesty. His children needed a father who didn't hide. When he told Catherine what he planned to do, she saw the shift in him. The moment grief became purpose. "I'm going to tell them myself," he said. Advisors panicked. Charles pleaded. Tradition, stability, the institution, all of it was at risk. But William had made his choice. Only the truth could move them forward. A live broadcast was arranged for that evening. No ornate backdrop, no regal staging, just a single chair, a single camera, and a man prepared to speak his truth. As houses across the country filled with tension and curiosity, the red light blinked on. He looked into the camera and began. No royal phrasing, no scripted assurances. Just a man telling the world about the DNA test that had upended everything he ever believed about his own bloodline. He explained that a second independent test had been conducted to confirm the findings, and the results revealed genetic discrepancies that could no longer be ignored. His voice remained steady as he spoke about the weight of discovering something that shook the very core of his identity, yet he emphasized that truth must come before titles, comfort, or tradition. "I could have hidden this," William admitted, eyes fixed on the camera. "I could have let lawyers bury it, but honesty, even when it hurts, is the only foundation worth building on." Around the world, people stopped in stunned silence. Social media froze. News anchors struggled to maintain composure. This wasn't a scandal uncovered by tabloids, it was a prince dismantling his own legacy in real time. William admitted he didn't have all the answers, that the full story behind the genetic discrepancy was still unfolding, but he refused to hide behind secrecy while the public speculated. When he mentioned his children, emotion finally cracked through. Whatever questions existed about his own lineage, he wanted them to inherit a monarchy built on truth, not image. The speech lasted only 12 minutes, but it felt like the world shifted. William ended simply, no fanfare, no royal exit, just a nod before stepping away into the shadows where Catherine waited, her hand immediately finding his. That image of unity would become one of the most shared photographs in history. Shock quickly transformed into sympathy and admiration. Many disagreed with his choice to go public, but most recognized his courage. Commentators who once criticized the royals now praised his integrity. Polls showed that his honesty had earned more trust than decades of controlled royal appearances ever had. But the real work had only begun. William and Charles, still fractured but united in purpose, launched a deep investigation, bringing in historians, genetic specialists, and long-silent witnesses. Painful truths surfaced, some answers emerged, and some mysteries remained. Under William's insistence, the palace adopted a revolutionary transparency, real updates, no spin, no propaganda. It was risky, but necessary. The old secrecy had led to this crisis, and only honesty could rebuild. As William worked to restore the monarchy and rediscover his own sense of self, Catherine remained his anchor, reminding him that their children, and history, were watching. What could have destroyed the monarchy instead transformed it into something more human, more accountable, and more real. Months later, standing at his window overlooking the city, William reflected on how close everything had come to collapse. One envelope had nearly ended centuries of history, yet it hadn't. It had changed it. The truth had almost broken the monarchy, but his courage had become the reason it survived.